F1 is about the drivers, gladiators going out in their chariots, superpowered, superhuman, fighting wheel to wheel for supremacy to see who's the best, who can come out first. So why on earth is Aston Martin paying a designer 150 million pounds over 5 years to come and work for them? In short, why do you need to be interested in Adrian Newey? On this channel, I talk about Adrian Newey a lot. I really like him. I really rate him. I think he's one of the biggest assets that any Formula One team can have, maybe its biggest asset. So we're going to talk about why, and I'm going to try and break that down. But before we do, I need you guys to do a couple of things. Number one, please hit that subscribe button. We need you guys. We need you guys badly so that we can start to do more of this more often and give you guys as much of what you want and what we love doing. Second, if you haven't done it already, go pick up a copy of Adrian Newey's book, How to Build a Car, his autobiography. This is the cover. Go get it from wherever you can. It's free on Kindle. I'm not promoting it or anything like that, but it is a really good reference guide. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from that book as well. So I'm going to break down why Adrian Newey is so important across three different things. The first is just to talk about who is he. Second is to talk about what success he's had, and third, makes him so good. So who is he? So in short, Adrian Newey is essentially a car designer, right? But that could mean anything. We have lots of car designers. Why is it important to know that that's what he is? He's not a team principal. He's not a CEO. His entire job, his whole meaning is to design racing cars. That's it. That's what he wants to do. Super competitive, super talented, designing race cars. How did he get there? Well, a little bit of why he's so good depends on where he came from. So that's why this is important. So he did his degree at Southampton University, um, and he did it at just around the time that Formula One was starting to discover aerodynamics and was heading towards the ground effect era for the first time. This was back in the early 80s, late 70s. And he did his dissertation in the Southampton University wind tunnel on ground effects. Bookmark that because it's important. His first job in motorsport was an aero job. He worked at Fittipaldi as a junior aerodynamicist under Dr. Harvey Postlethwaite. The fact that it was an aero job, again, that's going to become important later. Bookmark it. Then he moved to March Engineering. And March was kind of like a manufacturer of racing cars, the same way as like Dallara are now. Dallara build cars for Haas, for example, and they also build the spec chassis for IndyCar. March were kind of like that. If you had a racing team, you might go to March to design your car. So he designed sports cars. He then moved on to IndyCar, where he designed the March 85C that won IndyCar and the Indy 500 in 1985. But this is more than just about who he worked for, what he did. It's also about the jobs that he had within those teams, because again, why he's so good has a lot to do with what he did and the experience he gained from the jobs that he had. So he was a race engineer for Bobby Rahal in IndyCar in 1984. And again, in 1996, he race engineered Damon Hill. Just think about that, right? So in 1996, Adrian Newey was the technical director at the Williams Formula One team, but he was also race engineering Damon Hill. Try and transplant that into today and imagine Bono or GP Lambiase race engineering their respective drivers, Lewis and Max, but also designing the car that they're driving. Insane, right? But that's what Adrian Newey was doing in 1996. In terms of car design, he's moved around a whole heap of teams. Since moving on from March, he worked at Leighton House in Formula One. He worked at Williams in Formula One. He worked at McLaren in Formula One. He worked at Red Bull in Formula One. let's talk about the success because where he's worked isn't as important as what he has done at each of those teams. So he starts his Formula One career at Leighton House in 1987, leaving them again in 1990. The car itself, aerodynamically flawless. It set the template for things that were going to be done for the rest of the 90s. At one point, Alain Prost around Paul Ricard said, I cannot follow that car. It's too planted. He had to pull out in his McLaren. That's how good that Leighton House was. But the team didn't have the funding. And for the first part of the time that Newey was there, they didn't have the engine either. And yet, at the 1990 French Grand Prix, Ivan Capelli came in second and would have won the race if he hadn't had a gearbox issue. He then moved to Williams, where he was pivotal in pushing for active suspension. Why? Because he knew that it would provide a stable platform for the aerodynamics to do their job. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, it should, because it's exactly what Adrian Newey has been saying again about this rule set. The reason that the Red Bull RB18 and RB19 were so dominant is because their suspension allowed the stability to let the aerodynamics do their work. That's what the FW14B did, and it was revolutionary, absolutely revolutionary. He then went on an absolute run where 1992, the Williams won a championship, 1993, Williams won a championship, 1996, 1997, Williams win the championship. And then he resigned. He resigned from Williams at the end of 1996. He wasn't actually even there just to work at the team where the 1997 car won the championship in the hands of Jacques Villeneuve. And in those seasons, the car wasn't developed as much as it is today over the course of a season. So the car that they started with was still competitive at the end of the season, even without him doing the development. And there he was winning that title. He then moved to McLaren, where he won the title in the first 2 seasons he was there. Constructors in 98, drivers in 99. And when he left McLaren at the end of 2005, that season, the car he designed was the quickest on the grid, even if it didn't win the championship. Subsequently, he moves to Red Bull, and we all know what he's done there. Right from the off, he had success. But 2010 to 2013 were the big years, and that's where he really, really made his mark. So every single team that he has worked for in Formula One has had some form of success. And other than Leighton House, he has won championships at every single team, whether that's drivers or constructors or both. And they've often been for prolonged periods of time. The only other team principal, the only other technical director that you can say has had the same level of success in that era is Ross Brawn. But he managed in a very different way. And I think that's a story that we're going to cover another time. But what makes him so good? So if you try and look at his experience and what he has done and the stories that come out of that, and you'll find a lot of them in the book that he's written, I think it comes down to two main things. And it's not to do with his talent or his genius. All of those things are self-evident. Like, he has to have that level of natural ability to be able to pull off some of the things that he does. But I think it boils down to two different things. The first is that he's an avid reader of the rules. He's able to read the rules, but as Ross Brawn says, he's able to read what's not in the rules as well. Classic example, 1996 FW18. The FIA had mandated that there should be a foam headrest around the driver's head, and they had mandated that the headrest needed to be supported by the chassis, and the chassis was therefore given a minimum height. What it didn't say was how high the headrest needed to be mounted. It could be mounted anywhere, and the chassis just needed to reach that minimum height. So that's what Newey did. He mounted that headrest really low in the car and just put a couple of fins up to the height, the minimum height that the rules required for the cockpit to be compliant. End result? Well, just have a little look at what the Ferrari F310 of 1996 looked like. And that's Michael Schumacher around Spain. Iconic photo. Look at that settee, like armchair headrest around his head. Can't be good for aerodynamics, can it? Well, it wasn't. That was a dog of a car. Have a look at Damon Hill in the FW18. Yeah, his head's a bit more exposed. And you see these little fins? That is what complied with the rules. But the aerodynamics are much, much cleaner. And that car dominantly won the 1996 World Championship. The second thing is his breadth of experience. Here's a quote from his book. He says this: as a result of that experience at Fittipaldi and March, I'm one of the few designers with a degree of knowledge in different departments who can move between them. What it gives me is the insight to approach a design from a holistic point of view. And what does that mean in reality? Well, that means that when he looks at the design of a car, he doesn't just look at it from an aero point of view or a mechanical point of view. He's able to put all of those things together. And that's what the teams that he's worked at have said, that it's not that he designs the entire car, it's that he can direct where the car design should go that will give it the maximum potential because he's looking at how all of the different areas fit together. That's something that you don't get in modern Formula One because the teams are just too big. They have aero departments, they have mechanical departments, they have strategy departments, they have leadership departments, they have all of these different areas that come together to try and form a car. And you have a technical structure at the top that tries to marry all of those departments together, but there's never one person that's able to put it all together in one head, as it were. That's what Adrian Newey can do. And if you want to know how important that is, we saw how badly Mercedes fell off at the end of the last rule set. James Allison said that when he took over again from Mike Elliott, that all of the different teams were just working in little silos, and ultimately the management weren't effectively bringing that all together. And we know that Mike Elliott was an aero guy. Now, with the best will in the world, if you don't have the experience in aero and you don't have the experience in mechanical, how can you fully put all of that together? And then when you marry up how that feels for the driver, if you haven't race engineered, how can you know exactly what the driver needs from the car at the atomic level when you're designing that car from scratch? That's what Adrian Newey brings. He's able to bring that race engineering because he's race engineered. He's able to bring mechanical knowledge because he's done that in IndyCar. He's done it at March. He's able to bring that aero knowledge that he got from Fittipaldi. Let me give you an example. He talks about when he was at Fittipaldi, Keke Rosberg was the driver. Ground effects were just coming into force, and Harvey Postlethwaite, remember him, wanted to reduce some weight. The car was being run stiff, so he thought that he could just get rid of the springs and dampers and have the car just running on the bushes. And he thought, right, that'll be fine. Keke Rosberg went round once on the track, said it was undrivable, and Newey describes the car literally bouncing up and down so hard that you could see daylight underneath the front tires. And it was at that point that he realized that you were not going to be able to get ground effect cars to work if you didn't have a stable a mechanical platform to allow it to work. That was in 1977. And here we are in 2024, and he's made that knowledge count now. That's the level of expertise that Adrian Newey has. Why is that important? Why do you need to know about that? Because it means that when he goes to Aston Martin, when that's announced tomorrow, Aston Martin have got an absolute stick of dynamite on their hands. And if they can get their infrastructure and hardware to work for Adrian Newey, they'll win championships. And that's the key. Every other team in Formula One has got brilliant engineers, smart people, but all of them are roughly the same in terms of how good they can be. They're just limited by their resources and their management. But the one thing that these guys don't have is Adrian Newey. And Adrian Newey changes the level of a technical team. He changes it to a level that is above most technical teams. And that is what Aston Martin are paying £150 million for. Watch this space. As usual, please like, please subscribe, Please leave us a comment. We'll read as many as we can and we'll reply to as many as we possibly can. And we will see you guys in the next one.